Hi, I'm going to put a timestamp in the description so you can fast forward to hear the completed version of the sound to decide if you want to work through this tutorial. I want to give a huge thank you to Andy Leary, the programmer behind the Chronos, for helping me out with how to figure out how to translate the LFO time values to actual hertz, which is integral to this patch, and you'll see why in a second. So let's jump right in. We have a blank patch, and we're going to start out with the oscillators. Going to the oscillators, I just wanted a thicker timbre, so I had crossfaded from the saws to, just a little bit into the pulse waves. And then I had set the pulse width a little bit for each oscillator. And then once I'm done doing this, it doesn't really matter what these are set at. Once I'm done doing this, I'm going to jump into the mixer and turn up oscillator 2. And I actually forgot to disable parallel filter routing, but just make the filter routing parallel. And then you're going to have oscillator 1 go to filter 1 by setting the balance to 0, and then filter 2 by setting the balance to 99. For filter 1, let's choose a high pass. And then we're going to take the frequency all the way down. And we're also going to put the pan on left equals 1. So it's just pan left. And then pan the other filter right. And put the resonance just a little up on that. That's fine. Let's go to filter modulation. And we're going to use LFO 4. But I'm kind of jumping ahead because I'm not really explaining what this is going to end up doing. So let's go to LFO 4 itself. And I'm using LFO 4 first because we're going to use all of the other LFOs, actually. We're going to make good use of the LFOs in this patch. So I forgot to reset my settings, but basically LFO 4 is a sine wave. I added some shape. I put key sync on so it's polyphonic. In other words, an LFO is triggered per key for that note that you press on the keyboard. I put the fade on 40 with a little bit of delay and some key sync. Jumping back over to the filter, we do have our LFO 4 patched into filter 1 and 2. We'll put the LFO intensity on, I think I had it on like 69 for the first one and 50 for the second one. So basically, what that's doing is it's using that LFO to modulate the filter cutoff. And since we have each oscillator panned to the filters, and we have the, sent to each filter individually, and then we have the filters panned left and right, when this modulates the cutoff, it's going to be essentially, it's like having a stereo filtering effect where the left side is going to be high passed and then the right side is going to be low passed via the same mod source. So it almost sounds like panning. And if you want to hear what that sounds like right now. Really cool effect. I'm a really big fan of that like stereo kind of imaging effect. So anyway, let's jump into the pitch, and we're going to set AMS source 1 for oscillators 1 and 2. And before I start going to the intensity, let's go into AMS mixer 1, set LFO 1. And before I go into amount, let's go to the LFO itself. So LFO 1, I'm using a stepped waveform. And you could have it MIDI synced to quarter notes, but instead of doing that, I'm going to set it manually. But just to hear what the effect of this LFO is going to be doing, first of all, let me set this offset back to 0, because you'll have it on 0 by default. So let's go to the AMS mixer and add some amount. Let's put on 83. And these settings are crucial, that you get these exact. And I'll show you why in a second. Yeah, so let's go to oscillator pitch and have this on minus on negative modulation. So actually, before I do that, let me just show you something. LFO1 is, of course, a stepped waveform. If we have this at positive modulation, then when we add positive values to oscillator pitch, it'll basically make the pitch be positive when it's at a positive value. We'll jump into LFO. And negative when it drops below the line. So we would go from positive to negative in modulation. But I don't want that. I want to go from negative to positive. So the way I do that is very simply have negative modulation. And just so you can hear that, I might as well have it on 6 or whatever. And we're going to want that, of course, for both left and right. So oscillator 1 and 2. But I like it better with negative. So negative 6 is where we want it at. And I don't want it to be a bipolar modulation source. I want it to be unipolar. So we now have it as a bipolar LFO that's going from negative to positive. But since it's a bipolar modulation, when I hit C, let me just hit stop. Actually, I'd have to take off modulation. Let's go to pitch, and let's just turn off these sources. So when I hit C, and then I put these on, AMS mixer 1, AMS mixer 1, and then have the LFO on stopped, it's not playing a C note anymore. So in order to make it play a C note and have unipolar modulation, we set the offset to -99. We do -99 because we're already doing negative modulation, so essentially the LFO is flipped upside down, and then negative modulation is actually pushing the modulation up. So it starts on C and then climbs above C. I mean, if you're hitting a C note, of course. Let's go back to oscillator pitch and yeah. And actually have the LFO not stopped. But you could hear while it was stopped, I was still hitting a C. But yeah. So we don't want the LFO to be tempo synced because I want to add frequency modulation via LFO3. So let me take that down. I just forgot to reset all these parameters before doing the tutorial. So we have LFO3, and LFO3 is key synced. Shape, I have it on -50. It doesn't really matter. You can just have it on 0. That's fine. And then I had some fade and delay. If you need me to explain that, basically fade is just turning up the volume of the LFO. Delay is just delaying the effect of that volume increase. Delay without fade makes it delay and then start instantly, but delay with fade makes it delay and then gradually increase. It's commonly used for like string patches to add vibrato. We can keep this one tempo synced, and I also like to have a polyphonic LFO by keeping it key synced. I have it on triplets with 7, where it's divided 7 times. It just slows down the frequency. And then I have the intensity on 14 for that. And what that'll do is it'll run through what is essentially an arpeggiation from this LFO1, but it'll speed it up and slow it down. Cool. And it's all tempo synced. In order for this to still be actually tempo synced via quarter notes, you can see there's no frequency modulation. In order for it to retain its tempo sync, you need to have it at 40 and 50. And that's a tempo sync for 110 BPM for these parameters. I'll have a link to this thread I put on Korg forums so you can figure out how to calculate the exact LFO times yourself. So I want to make this patch a little bit more complicated by throwing in LFO2 to pitch. And we'll go to the AMS source and add LFO2. I guess I actually never really went through the whole tunings of that LFO and why it's making a whole tone scale, but I've already tried filming this like 3 times and I'm super over filming it again. So anyway, LFO2 is now going to be patched into the pitch for both oscillators since we're just using this AMS source. And going into that LFO and explaining it, it's just a few steps. Again, I have set the hertz value for this LFO manually with that offset, so it is a unipolar modulation source, and LFO3 is affecting the intensity. So hearing what that sounds like, it's going to sound like an arpeggiated climb. Cool. Now jumping into common, I just throw on a left, center, right, and a smooth hall, and then just kind of playing octaves.